Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a delight to welcome you to the opening plenary of the IISS 11th Manama Dialogue. May I open this morning's proceedings by thanking very warmly His Royal Highness Prince Salman, Deputy Supreme Commander, Crown Prince, First Deputy Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain, for his graciously hosting us all at dinner last night, and of course thank very warmly His Excellency President Al-Sisi for the marvelous opening keynote address he delivered to this dialogue yesterday evening. We have a full program today and tomorrow, 4 plenary sessions today, 4 simultaneous special sessions tomorrow morning, and 1 plenary to close the dialogue at lunchtime tomorrow. To remind, the plenary sessions are on the record. That means the statements made from this podium are on the record, but it also means that the questions and comments coming from the floor are on the record, so participants here should exercise the same discipline as those on the podium in the way in which they frame their questions and comments. But the point of this dialogue is to have, in the celebrated diplomatic parlance, a free and frank exchange, so don't feel overly constrained by the on-the-record principle in speaking directly, given the very difficult issues that this region is grappling with, and the need for an honest exchange of views and innovative ideas in order to inform public policy. When we move to the question and answer session, I will be taking a number of comments from the floor and then returning to the speakers for their replies. I remind you that each of you have a delegate badge, and that delegate badge contains within it a chip. And if you look at the chip, it even has an arrow on it, which shows you the direction of travel that the chip must travel into your microphone in order to seek the floor. And you need to do 2 things. You need to put your badge into the microphone set and press the button. The button will turn green. That does not mean that your microphone is on. It only means that your name fully appears in my list of people seeking the floor. And then when I call on you, I will be able to turn your microphone on, and then, of course, crucially, be able to turn it off at a certain point. So don't worry if when you put your badge chip in and you press the button, your microphone turns green. That doesn't mean that it is on. It means that you're in the queue. And this system allows us to get a lot more questions and comments in, because there's no delay in moving from one questioner to the other. Now that the room has fully settled with those administrative remarks, let me open this plenary. The first plenary at the IISS Manama Dialogue is usually on the subject of the U.S. and regional security, and is so again. Many of you know that we host also the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, and whenever we are there, the U.S. Secretary of Defense is asked about the fact that while a pivot to Asia has been announced, the United States seems regularly engaged in the Middle East. And whenever we are in the Middle East, the U.S. representative is asked about the question that the government has formally pivoted to Asia and is freely operating and navigating through the seas of South China waters, while aircraft carriers are migrating from here and then coming back again. So this question as to the balance of U.S. interests in the Middle East and Asia, not to mention Europe, where there are also now some security challenges, has become a perennial one, but is all the more important now, given the very many crises in Syria, Iraq, Yemen and Libya that we face, and and we convene here, as you all know, a day after very important meetings have been held in Vienna to see if there can be a collective policy towards the tragedy in Syria. So this session is very important, and it's why we are delighted that we will be first addressed by the Foreign Minister of our host country, Sheikh Khalid bin Ahmed Al Khalifa, an old friend of the IISS, a regular speaker at this event. Bahrain is a strong ally of the United States, and we look forward to his perspectives on U.S. and regional security. And then following his statement, I'll be delighted to welcome to the stage Tony Blinken, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, who has worked very long hours and long years for the Obama administration, first with Vice President Biden, then with the President, and now, of course, as U.S. Deputy Secretary of State. So we have two very authoritative statements and look forward to the discussion that will follow. Sheikh Khalid bin Ahmed, Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain, the podium is yours.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful.
Yes, it's a great pleasure to join my good friend, Mr. Anthony Blinken, in this plenary session, and I would like to thank my dear friend, Dr. John Chipman, Professor Francois Heisberg, and the rest of the IISS team for organizing the 11th Manama Dialogue, and for their tireless efforts year after year. Of all of the challenges we face in the region, no challenge is more pressing than the situation in Syria. It is perhaps the crisis of the decade, and the effects of this crisis are not limited to this region. As you all well know, the key challenge in Syria is not merely the existence of terrorist groups such as Daesh or Hezbollah or Jabhat al-Nusra. The emergence of these groups is a symptom of what is wrong in Syria. The challenge in Syria is the loss of Syrian unity and the disintegration of the tolerant societal bonds that held a multi-sect Levant together for hundreds of years. A vacuum was created in Syria when the response to popular demonstrations in 2011 resulted in the destruction of cities and the displacements of millions of innocent Syrians. This vacuum allowed Daesh to establish strongholds and then use those territories as a launching pad for their invasion of Iraq. The deteriorating situation in Syria left normal Syrians suddenly facing a world where the sect that you happen to be born into could possibly determine whether you lived or died. This vacuum was filled not only by terrorist organizations, but also by regional states seeking their own hegemonic aims. Commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard routinely led regime forces and Hezbollah fighters in combat operations against Syrian rebel factions. We believe the solution in Syria must be based on returning the Syrians to a state of unity as soon as possible. However, the large number of Syrians fleeing the country complicates this. We must aim to give Syrians enough security, hope, and belief to remain in Syria and work towards building a better future. The best way to achieve this is through the process outlined in the Geneva I Peace Conference. World powers, along with regional states, must work to set up a transitional governing body that preserves the civilian and military state institutions and includes all relevant Syrian groups. This can then pave the way for Syrians to decide the future of their country. We must approach this political solution with the same determination and effort as the fight against the terrorists. Only then can we achieve the desired results. There are those who will say that we must defeat Daesh first, before any of this can take place. But Daesh can only be defeated by a unified Syrian front against it. The presence of Daesh in Syria is not an impediment to a political solution between the Syrians. It is what makes the necessity of a political solution all the more pressing. Distinguished guests, the continuing proliferation of terrorist organizations in the region remains a serious concern. Besides Iraq, Daesh has expanded its operations into places like Libya and Nigeria through declarations of loyalty by already established terrorist organizations and the establishment of so-called wilayat. Daesh has also claimed responsibility for terrorist attacks on mosques in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, giving us a glimpse of the type of organizations Daesh could evolve into, even if it is defeated militarily in Syria and Iraq. But Daesh is not the only terrorist threat we face in the region. Over the past couple of years, the Islamic Republic of Iran has provided sanctuary and financial support for those charged with conducting terrorist acts in GCC states and rest of the region. Closer to home, Iran has hosted Bahraini citizens in IRGC training camps, where potential terrorists learn skills such as IED construction, marksmanship, and weapon smuggling. Iran has also conducted smuggling operations to bring in explosives and weapons, including C4, Claymore mines, and AK-47 assault rifles. As a result, over the past couple of years, 439 IEDs have been found and safely disposed, or have exploded, causing injuries, killing 16 police officers and injuring thousands. These actions, along with the terrorist attacks conducted by Hezbollah and their proxies across the region, are no less a threat to us than Daesh and Al-Qaeda. As far as better relations with our neighbor to the east, the ball is firmly in Iran's side of the field. We in Bahrain and the GCC have repeatedly expressed our willingness to engage and improve our relations with Iran. We sincerely believe this is to be mutually beneficial, but not at the expense of regional stability, and certainly not when Iranian officials publicly boast about having captured 4 Arab capitals through their Iranian Islamic Revolution. The international community must come together just as it did to contain and hopefully pacify Iran's nuclear program, to put an end to Iran interference in the affairs of regional states. We must not underestimate the damage to regional stability caused by Iran's action in the region. If we are not serious enough about this, I'm afraid we will remain in a state of conflict indefinitely. Distinguished guests, the GCC is committed to shouldering more of the burden in ensuring regional security. This is not a sudden policy shift. It is a policy that has been developing over more than a decade. As GCC capabilities increase, so too will our share of regional responsibilities. This is most evident in our military involvement in Yemen. I would like to make it very clear that the GCC military intervention in Yemen was not taken lightly. It was by the invitation of the legitimate president of Abd Mansour Hadi, and it was our final option, and we are not intent on continuing military operations a day longer than necessary. The reason we intervened is that the Houthis, after having taken part in the political process, reneged on their commitments and decided to capture Yemen, the whole of Yemen, by force, taking the Yemeni people hostage to their political ambition. We simply could not stand back and allow an extremist proxy movement with ties to Iran and Hezbollah to take over Yemen. The GCC military intervention is not solely to counter Iranian influence, I have to say. We had to intervene to stop Yemen from sliding into an imminent civil war, an almost certain breakup. Moreover, a dominant Houthi insurgency that does not play by the rules and demands more than its fair share of power threatens a fragile political balance in Yemen, exacerbating already challenging economic and environmental challenges. I would like to assure everybody that the GCC is as concerned as anyone about the humanitarian situation in Yemen. We are committed to doing everything it takes to improve the lives of Yemenis and to alleviate the immediate effects of the current conflict. Saudi Arabia and the rest of the GCC have, through the newly established King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center, contributed large quantities of humanitarian aid to Yemen, and we urge the international community to join us in providing much-needed aid and assistance. Aden Airport is open. The seaports are operational. The only items are not allowed into Yemen are weapons that could be used by the Houthis. There are no restrictions on any other items. The real obstacle in getting the aid to where it's needed is the fighting in Houthi-controlled areas. The problem is not with the coalition. It is with the Houthi rebels who refuse to stop the fighting or let any aid in, or commercial goods through. We are committed to a long-term political solution in Yemen. The Houthis can have a future in Yemen, so long as they lay down their arms, abandon ties to terrorists, and participate in legitimate political process. Distinguished guests, given the delicate situation in the region, the last thing we need is violence at the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex, which had the potential to anger almost a third of the world population. It is the Israeli government's responsibility to maintain the long-standing agreement with the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan regarding jurisdiction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and to prevent all those who seek to incite violence from entering. In summation, I would like to reiterate the commitment of Bahrain and the GCC to maintaining peace and stability in the region. We continue to work closely with our valued partners, the United States of America, the United Kingdom, and the rest of our friends around the world, to work closely towards achieving peace and stability in the region. We do not seek conflict, but if the security of our region is threatened, we will not hesitate to use all means at our disposal to ensure peace and security. Thank you very much.
Sheikh Khalid, thank you very much for remarks that simultaneously brought out the human dimension of the conflicts we face and the vital strategic nature of the issues at stake. You set out the entire geopolitical backdrop against which this summit takes place. May I now invite to the podium U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken.
Good morning. John, thank you so much for your introduction and especially for your leadership at the helm of IISS, which is more necessary and more valuable than ever before. And it's especially a pleasure to be here to sit on a panel with my esteemed colleague and friend, His Excellency Sheikh Khalid. I'd also like to thank the government of Bahrain, and especially His Royal Highness Crown Prince Salman, for hosting what is truly a timely gathering. And it's very good to be in Bahrain, a close, valued, and long-standing partner of the United States. As we look across the world, the strategic environment in which we're operating is more fluid and more fraught with complexity than ever before. Power is shifting among, below, and beyond nation states. This shift is urged on by the rapid pace of technological change, the growth of economic interdependence, the scale of global connectivity. It requires governments to be more accountable to sub-state and non-state actors, from the mayors of megacities to the private sector to super-empowered individuals and groups. All of us are linked in unprecedented ways, incentivizing new forms of cooperation, but also creating shared vulnerabilities. Among those vulnerabilities is the weakening of state authority, the erosion of order, the emergence of ungoverned space, the proliferation of weapons and technology, the surfacing or resurfacing of sectarianism and religious extremism. Between states, we see it too. The growth of regional rivalries, the spread of dangerous proxy wars, the stoking of violent extremism. The most severe consequences of all this destabilization impact citizens themselves, as millions of men, women, and children are pushed to the brink of survival, overwhelming the capacity of the world's humanitarians to respond. And nowhere is that more evident than right here in the Middle East. A forum like this one offers an urgently needed setting to assess these current realities and discuss how to build the future we all seek for the Middle East, one that will sustain peace, security, and stability over the long term, one that will encourage innovation, ensure the equal participation of women and girls, spur inclusive growth, and uphold the rights of all citizens. It's become fashionable of late to argue that the United States is disengaged from the Middle East, from this task of securing the present and helping to realize a brighter future. It's fashionable, but it's wrong. We are more deeply engaged today than ever before, diplomatically, economically, culturally, and yes, militarily. What this argument is really about is the nature of our engagement, especially for those whose definition of engagement is weighed heavily toward large-scale, open-ended military interventions. We have a broader definition of engagement, a different one that we saw in the decade past, one that seeks to use all the sources of American power, the might of our military, but also the reach of our economy, the determination of our diplomacy, the universality of our values, and the powerful attraction of American education, science, technology, and innovation. One that builds the capacity of willing partners to fight for the future of their own countries. One that strives to marry wisdom and strength, humility and confidence. It's tempting to want a neat answer that imposes order and ensures freedom and stability overnight. But the challenges before us defy silver bullet solutions. We should and we must debate our strategies and consider the full range of all our options, knowing that there can be consequences to inaction. But we cannot deny the lessons we've learned over a decade of sacrifice about the effectiveness and sustainability of indefinite and undefined military interventions that have vast unintended consequences. And we cannot overlook that the most sustainable solutions are best generated by the people and governments of this region with our strong support, not imposed from the outside. Vice President Biden likes to say that in many places he visits, he hears that the United States is all at once the source of all its problems and the only solution. The fact is, most of the turmoil in the Middle East is not about us, nor can we magically solve its problems. But we are using our unique capacity to mobilize our partners in the international community against common threats, and we are working to empower those in the region who are committed to building a better future for their people. Our engagement today is grounded by our deep and enduring commitment to this region and to its people. This region is home to some of our oldest and closest friends and allies. And as President Obama has made clear repeatedly, defending them against aggression has been, is, and will remain a vital interest of the United States. The region's oil supplies have powered industries and economies for generations, since Gulf prospectors first struck oil in Bahrain in 1931. And while we are now more energy sufficient, Middle East oil continues to drive the global market, and we remain determined to secure its supply. But it's not just the wealth under the ground that drives economic growth. It is this region's extraordinary human resources and their capacity for innovation and entrepreneurship, but only if we work to unleash the potential of all of its citizens. Our own future, if we fail to support theirs. We believe deeply in the future of this region. We also know that this kind of progress cannot be sustained without security, and that growth will never last without peace. Our commitment to regional security anchors all that we do today and the future that we're trying to shape for tomorrow. That's why President Obama and Secretary Kerry were so determined to address the international community's concerns about Iran's nuclear program. After 2 years of negotiations, every single one of Iran's pathways to a bomb is blocked through the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action far into the future. But the nuclear deal is just that, a nuclear deal. We have no illusions about its larger impact. We remain laser-focused on Iran's many other objectionable actions, and especially for us here today, its efforts to spread instability throughout the region and to support terrorism. As the Camp David Summit demonstrated, we're bringing new intensity to our security cooperation to meet these ongoing challenges from Iran. That intensity is producing concrete results. We're linking the ballistic missile defense systems of the Arabian Peninsula. We're providing special operations training. We're cooperating more deeply on maritime security, strengthening cybersecurity, bolstering cooperation in intercepting foreign fighters, terrorist financing, and illicit cargoes. And we're expediting sophisticated military sales, including recently announced F-16 support to Bahrain, some of the most advanced ships in the world for Saudi Arabia to patrol the Gulf, air and missile defense systems to the UAE, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Kuwait. We've also joined with Arab states and dozens of other partners across the globe in a coalition to counter and ultimately defeat Daesh. Our military campaign is paired with comprehensive efforts to disrupt the flow of foreign fighters, to counter Daesh's nihilistic narrative, and to curtail the flow of financing. 14 months ago, this coalition didn't exist. In the short time since, it has brought together 65 countries, launched more than 7,700 airstrikes, forced Daesh to change how it conducts its military operations, impeded its command and control, confronted its propaganda machine, and deprived it of 30% of the territory in Iraq that it held just a year ago. From the critical border town of Kobani, Syria, to Tikrit, Iraq, we have helped liberate communities and enabled many people, finally, to return home. In northern Syria, the coalition has secured 85% of the Turkish-Syrian border, and we're enhancing our air campaign and efforts on the ground to help drive Daesh out of the remaining 70-mile stretch that it controls. So closing off its most vital supply line for foreign fighters and materiel. We're stepping up support to moderate opposition fighters to help them consolidate the gains that they've made and to begin to put pressure on al-Raqqa, Daesh's self-proclaimed capital. Ultimately, however, lasting peace and stability for the region cannot be imposed from above, from the outside, or by force. They need to be built from within by governments that are inclusive, accountable to their citizens, and interconnected with the world. Security assistance alone cannot get governments there. It requires political accommodation to ensure the freedom, dignity, and security for all citizens. As my friend the Foreign Minister said, the civil war in Syria remains the region's most immediate and complex challenge. The refugee catastrophe is an outgrowth of Assad's vengeance against his own people, and the cost of the conflict rises every single day for the region, for Europe, but most of all, for the Syrian people. There is no end in sight unless we make one, and that is exactly what Secretary Kerry is working so hard to do, including in Vienna this week, where countries came together with a new sense of urgency. The discussions were constructive, and all participants agreed to a number of things, including to press for a nationwide ceasefire and to pursue a political transition that ensures Syria's unity independence, territorial integrity, and secular character. As Secretary Kerry has said, this is the beginning of a new diplomatic process, not the final chapter. Russia's intervention in Syria is a powerful example of the law of unintended consequences. It will have two primary effects. First, it will increase Russia's leverage over Assad. But second, it will increase the conflict's leverage over Russia. And that in turn creates a compelling incentive to Russia to work for, not against, a political transition. Russia cannot afford to sustain its military onslaught against everyone opposed to Assad's brutal rule. The costs will mount every day in economic, political, and security terms, but at best only to prevent Assad from losing, not to make him win. There is no military victory to be had. Meanwhile, the quagmire will spread and deepen, drawing Russia further in, and Russia will be seen as being in league with Assad, Hezbollah, Iran, alienating millions of Sunnis in Syria, the region, and indeed in Russia itself. Already, Russia's indiscriminate air campaign, while dropping many bombs, is making virtually no gains on the ground. And yet we share many important interests with Russia in Syria. Defeating Daesh, which poses a threat to all of us, and preserving Syria as a unified, sovereign state with a secular, inclusive, and non-sectarian government, its institutions intact. We can and we should make common cause of these common objectives. That requires a political transition that leads to Assad's departure, because none of those goals is achievable as long as he remains. As Secretary Kerry has said, Russia has a choice now about how to move forward, and we would welcome it making the right choice for our shared interests. We have to break the mindset, encouraged by both Assad and Daesh, that the only choice Syrians have is between the two of them. A different future is not only possible, it is imperative. This morning, I'm pleased to announce that the United States will provide an additional $100 million in assistance in support of the Syrian opposition, bringing our total support for their efforts to $500 million. This assistance enables local and provincial institutions to provide basic services. It keeps schools open. It helps broadcast the voices of independent media. It empowers civil society leaders to hold their local governments accountable. As part of this assistance, we're providing $15 million to the Syria Recovery Trust, a multi-donor initiative that's already reached 2 million Syrians with support for essential services, like restoring access to electricity and rebuilding hospitals. A lifeline for embattled communities, the Syrian Recovery Trust Fund helps liberated communities get back on their feet by supporting projects that are sometimes bigger than any one country can handle alone. When a political resolution is reached, it will mean more than the end of the war. It will mean the beginning of an effort to rebuild a nation under a new government, a monumental task that will fall to those whose existence is so fragile today. And so we call on all countries to support the Syrian Recovery Trust Fund and help lay a foundation from which Syrians can repair their shattered lives and restore their country. In Libya, the days ahead are critical. The United States looks to Libyan leaders to put the interests of the Libyan people above divisive politics, to endorse the final political framework text, and empower a government of national accord to begin to govern, restore stability, and eradicate terrorism. The United States and the international community will be Libya's determined partner in these efforts. In Yemen, the United States shared the determination of our Gulf partners not to let stand the Houthis' campaign to take over the country by force and threaten Saudi Arabia. We must focus our efforts on supporting the work of the UN Special Envoy to get all parties to return to UN-brokered political talks to find a lasting, peaceful solution based on UN Security Council Resolution 2216. The citizens of Yemen, many of them in dire need, cannot afford to wait any longer. It's incumbent on all concerned to protect civilians and to allow humanitarian aid to reach all those who need it. Secretary Kerry has worked with President Abbas, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and King Abdullah to try to restore calm and bring about an end to the recent violence. As President Obama has repeatedly said, the United States will never stop supporting and defending Israel's right to protect itself and its citizens. Just as we will never stop believing in the necessity to give hope, opportunity, and a political horizon to those despairing of it. And just as we will never cease working to realize the goal of two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and in security. We can't want that future more than the parties themselves. But we have no great...
ليس لدينا أي مخاوف أكبر من مساعدة الطرفين على تحقيق ما في مصلحتهما. السيدات والسادة، من الصعب أن ننظر إلى الأحداث التي وقعت في المنطقة في السنوات الماضية وأن نستخلص عبرة أمل أو أن نكون متفائلين. اليوم مع بعض الاستثناءات
more chaos. We should reflect on the lessons of this experience, and all of us, whatever our convictions, should do so with some humility. It's not the call for freedom that has stoked instability. It's the absence of open debate, the closing of political space, the failure to foster a culture of civic responsibility, and the conviction of those at the bottom that they'll be pushed off the economic ladder the moment they begin to climb toward the top. Countering extremist forces threatening the Middle East requires building institutions legitimate and inclusive enough to unite everyone, Sunni or Shia, conservative or liberal, secularist or Islamist, provided they pursue their goals peacefully. When nations squeeze out moderate voices, they create a vacuum filled by extremists. When people feel shut out, their sense of alienation and marginalization sharpens divisions that extremists love to exploit. That's why the United States is working for a settlement in Syria that will give people viable choices, other than supporting Assad for fear of terrorists or terrorists for fear of Assad. It's why we support a peace process for Yemen that reunites the country rather than deepening sectarian divisions, why we are pressing the competing sides in Libya to come together in a government that represents all of the country's people, why we have urged greater space for peaceful dissent in Egypt and here in Bahrain, so that all who reject violence can share the privileges and the responsibilities of participation in the political system. We recently had reason to cheer when a coalition of human rights defenders, lawyers, business owners, and labor union leaders in Tunisia were awarded the highest prize for peace in the world. By fostering an open society and nurturing inclusive politics and governance, Tunisia offers a promising model of the possible. It's a model the United States will support and defend, just as we will take action to secure our interests and our values and all those who share them, just as we will continue to stand by and with partners in the Middle East, and just as we will work with equal parts strength and wisdom to build sustainable stability, security, and prosperity in a region whose perils are outweighed only by its promise. I thank you very much.
Tony, thank you very much for that important strategic survey and political statement on the U.S. perspective on the region. I've got 6 or 7 questions and comments already. We'll move right to, as it were, the floor debate. To remind, if you want the floor, do put your card in and press the button to turn your microphone green. My first question comes from Dr. Saud bin Hamad Al-Saibai of Saudi Arabia. Dr. Saud, your microphone is on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excuse me, I'm going to speak in Arabic. My comments to Mr. Blinken. Mr. Blinken,
Mr. Blinken, in this region, there are multiple conflicts, multiple confrontations at the same time. These conflicts and these confrontations not only threaten our regimes, but could even reach the homeland of the United States of America. What could the United States do in order to prevent the crumbling down of the notion of nation states in the Middle East? And is the United States of America ready to truly harness their alliances with Sunni Arab states and try to keep on countering the Shiite model of Iran, because the recent nuclear deal with Iran could scare away some Sunni countries from building alliances with the United States. What is the vision of the United States of America, and what are the procedures and the measures that will be taken by the U.S. in order to weaken the Shiite militias that are supported by Iran in this region? As for Syria, why is the United States not yet mobilizing the inhabitants of Iraq and Syria to fight Daesh, to fight the Islamic State organization? This would contribute to the marginalization and the curbing of Daesh, because we should not give any signs that Iran is a potential ally of the United States in this region. This alliance will prevent any serious Sunni effort to contain Daesh, working hand in hand with local partners to find safe refuges within Syria in order to protect Syrian refugees would contribute to recovering the credibility of countries, helping in building a moderate, reliable opposition that could militarily and politically be more linked and more in touch with the internal Syrian pulse. Moreover, I believe that strengthening ties with primordial allies in this region, such as Egypt, is very important, because it is impossible to adopt a strategy aiming at strengthening states in the Middle East without making sure the United States have active ties with Egypt. Thank you.
Indeed. The next question is from the UAE, Dr. Al-Badr Al-Shatari. Your microphone is on.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank both the speakers for an excellent talk this morning. I just have two short questions. One
very short.
One for Sheikh Khalid regarding, do you believe that the nuclear deal emboldened Iran, or it has a moderating effect on their behavior, or has nothing? So is it neutral, or emboldened Iran, or is moderating Iran, at least now or in the long run? My second is to Secretary Blinken regarding, you are right, by the way, you are not disengaging in the strategic areas like the Gulf, but it does seem that you are completely disengaging from the peace process. Now, whatever efforts you are doing in this case tantamount to giving a Tylenol to a dying patient. You are not doing much. It doesn't seem, at least that's the impression. Could you give me any indicators that you are doing more to get to the two-state solution? Any real action? Is there any another or imminent initiative that will lead or make us hopeful that it will lead to a solution? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Badr. From Bloomberg, Josh Rogan.
Thank you very much. My question is for Secretary Blinken. Secretary Blinken, for years the U.S. policy has been to increase pressure on Assad to compel him to come to the negotiating table. Based on what we've seen in Vienna and what we've heard from you today, it seems that now the U.S. is outsourcing that pressure to the Russian government. This is based on an assumption, as you stated, that eventually Russia will suffer fatigue and will calculate that it cannot win in Syria. What if that assumption is wrong? What if the Russian definition of winning is not the same as ours? How long do we plan to wait to see if Russia will fulfill this mission of pressuring Assad? If they don't do that, what's the plan? Is there one?
Thank you. And from the largest Muslim country in the world, Professor Dewi Fortuna Anwar of Indonesia.
Thank you, John. I would like to focus on the need for this inclusive political development that both speakers have talked about, the need for the states to have homegrown solutions. And Mr. Blinken has emphasized the importance of truly inclusive participatory political, social, economic process. But we also know that in these very diverse regions, the diversity in the religious groupings, ethnic groups, and so on, have been complicated by the regional rivalry, and we have heard so much about the Sunni-Shia divides. Now, I would like to tease more of the United States. To what extent do you want to do this capacity building? Where is the line between helping and empowering the local political development? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take one more question and then come back to the panel. Don't worry, I've got 6 or 8 more, but we'll have time for second and third rounds. So the last in this round from Republic of Korea, Dr. Chung Min Lee.
Thank you, John. My question is to Secretary Blinken. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your great remarks. Can the U.S. defeat ISIS or ISIL in the Middle East and maintain freedom of the seas in the South China Sea? And what is your grand strategy, especially as the U.S. goes into a critical election year, and then you also face, unfortunately, a downward trend in defense spending? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Deputy Secretary got 5 or 6 questions. Sheikh Khalid got 1, so I'll give the Deputy Secretary first crack.
I was going to see if Sheikh Khalid wanted to trade with me. Well, thank you. Let me try to address these questions briefly, but also hopefully a little bit thoroughly. First, Dr. Salih from Saudi Arabia, this question about what we can do, what we are doing, what we should be doing to prevent the crumbling of nation states and how to counter Iran. Well, I would maintain that is exactly what we are doing, and in 2 ways. First, as I said a few moments ago, the process that didn't begin at Camp David, but was intensified by Camp David, is all about helping our partners in the region strengthen even more their capacity to defend against Iranian aggression of all kinds. And as I suggested, we're seeing real results from that process. It wasn't simply a one-off meeting at Camp David. It resulted in working groups in 5 and actually now a 6th area that have already not only met, but have begun to produce concrete outcomes. And it is everything, as I suggested, from building up regional missile defenses, to empowering special operating forces, to working more closely on cybersecurity, maritime security, interdictions, expediting weapon sales, etc. So these are real things, and they're going to enhance the capacity of our partners working with us and working together to deal with any threat to them, especially from Iran. And there's a clear vision there about what we can do, what we must do, and what we are doing to achieve that result. You asked also why we're not mobilizing the people of Iraq and Syria to fight Daesh. Well, I believe that's exactly what we are doing. And again, it's not necessarily what's always in the headlines, but we are seeing real progress. It's slow, it's difficult, it's hard, it takes time, just as we said it would from the outset, but we are moving forward, as I said earlier. Think about where we were a year ago in Iraq. Baghdad was under threat. Erbil was under threat. Tikrit was gone. The Mosul Dam was gone. The Yazidis were at risk of being massacred. Daesh was moving with freedom throughout the country. Now, not only has this forward momentum been stopped, not only is Baghdad secure, Erbil secure, the Mosul Dam back, Tikrit, 85% of the population returned, but Daesh controls 30% less territory than it did 1 year ago. That is real, demonstrable progress. We have challenges. Our Iraqi partners have challenges, particularly in Anbar. But the government is working increasingly to mobilize tribes to bring them into the fight with our strong support. It's a work in progress, but it's making progress. And as I suggested, in Syria, working with different forces on the ground, supporting them, backing them, supplying them, we're also seeing progress. The critical border between Syria and Turkey. Over the last 6 months, 85% of that border has been removed from the border crossings, removed from the control of Daesh. And as I said, the remaining 15%, in close coordination with Turkey and other key partners, we're going to take that back as well. And we are going to see forces on the ground in Syria with our support exert pressure on Daesh's capital, in al-Raqqa. In the south, we're working closely with Jordan and other countries in support of local opposition there, also to bolster them. And all of this, from the east, from the north, from the south, is beginning to exert pressure on Daesh. putting it off its toes and onto its heels. But again, this is not going to happen overnight, but it is happening, and it does involve the mobilization of forces on the ground. Dr. Al-Badr from the UAE, you suggested that it seems that we're disengaging from the peace process. And are there any indications that we're doing more to bring about a two-state solution? Well, look, I'll be frank and blunt. As I said a few moments ago, we cannot want peace more than the parties themselves. And if and when they demonstrate a commitment to pursue it, no one will work harder than the United States to achieve it. Now, we're exploring with President Abbas, with Prime Minister Netanyahu, their ideas, their thoughts, their willingness to move forward. Prime Minister Netanyahu will be in Washington in just a few days, and we'll listen very carefully to what he has to say about his vision for the future, just as we're listening very carefully to President Abbas and any leaders in the region. And I think the United States has demonstrated repeatedly that when Israelis and Palestinians are prepared to take the risks involved in searching for peace, no one will be a stronger advocate, no one will be a stronger supporter than the United States of America. Josh Rogan from Bloomberg, you asked about the policy to intensify pressure on Assad and the question about whether this has now been outsourced somehow to Russia. I think what everyone understands is that, and increasingly Russia is understanding, is that ultimately there is no military outcome or solution to this problem. Assad cannot win and take back his country. He's forfeited that, and he now controls somewhere between 20 and 30% of the country. But the pressure on him will continue to grow. And the forces that are being empowered on the ground to fight Daesh are also increasingly in a position to help create the conditions for political transition in their country as well. And we will continue to work and strengthen our support for those forces. I don't want to get into hypotheticals about what if something doesn't work. We're determined that it will work. And of course, we always plan for any contingency. Professor Dowie of Indonesia, you asked, I think, a very interesting and important question about in diverse societies, the line between helping and empowering, and potentially, as I understood it at least, the danger potentially of empowering those who may not share the vision that we have and that is so necessary for inclusive governance. Well, I would say that if you look at what happened recently in Iraq, when Daesh took Mosul and was threatening the country, we immediately moved to, of course, look at the security of our own people and diplomats, to assess the capacity of the Iraqi military, and to determine what could and should be done to engage and to help turn Daesh around. But our engagement did not reach full fruition until we saw a change in Iraqi governance, precisely for the reasons that I believe you suggested. It makes no sense to empower forces that are simply going to deepen divisions, the very divisions that create space and fuel extremism and terrorism. And so there was an important change in Iraq, and Prime Minister Abadi has demonstrated repeatedly his determination to build a more inclusive as well as decentralized society that can bring people together instead of splitting them apart. Finally, Dr. Lee from Korea, can we, as I understood the question, can we handle Daesh and challenges in other regions like the South China Sea at the same time? And I believe the answer is yes, we can. But of course, we're not alone in these efforts. When it comes to Asia and the challenges there, let me just say briefly, and I say this having come recently from China, Japan, and Korea about 2 weeks ago. With China, we are working to do two things at the same time: to deepen and broaden our cooperation, and I think we've achieved real and demonstrable results. Everything from climate change to Ebola to Afghanistan to military confidence building measures, but also to deal very directly and very forthrightly with our differences. And there too, in recent weeks, we've seen President Obama engaging directly and very clearly with President Xi about our concerns about China's actions in the South China Sea, or in the realm of cybersecurity, or for that matter, at home in terms of human rights and the space for its defenders. And with regard to the South China Sea, we have been very clear that it is a fundamental interest of the United States to sustain freedom of navigation, to ensure that disputes are resolved peacefully and in accordance with international law in a way that supports existing norms and rules. We will fly and sail anywhere that international law allows, and we'll work closely with every country that wishes to resolve these disputes in a peaceful manner. And so we're taking a very active role with China, with the ASEAN countries, with all the claimants to urge them when it comes to their various aspirations to freeze their reclamation, construction, and militarization projects to allow space for these disputes to be resolved peacefully. And we believe that that is very possible. But what I think you're seeing in the South China Sea in particular is that it is China's actions that are causing other countries to look to the United States, to look to Japan, to look to Australia, to look to India and others for help because they're concerned. And we've suggested strongly to China that working cooperatively and peacefully to resolve any differences is the best way to go, but also to ensure their own relations with countries in the region.
Sheikh Khalid.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Dr. Al-Badr, for your question whether this deal emboldened or moderated Iran. Well, this is something that we'll have to wait and see, but definitely I can say that there's no change in Iran's position or behavior in the region. Iran continues to ship arms and fighters to Syria and involved with their own soldiers and generals in all those fights, and they continue to support the proxies. They continue to ship weapons to, or try to smuggle weapons into Yemen. They continue to undermine countries and states of the region. So Iran is at a crossroads, and it's their choice. They will either choose to have a major shift in their foreign policy and do the phase 2 of fixing their relationship with the world after doing the nuclear deal, and hopefully it will succeed, by also having a new approach to the region that is a better approach than what they are pursuing now. So they either open up to their neighbors, stop meddling, and stop supporting proxies, and that will be a major shift in their policy that will be noticeable and welcomed, or else they will continue with this policy that will not bring them any stability, and they'll be continuing to send the wrong message to their neighbors and to their own people. Their own people are there, they are civilized, they are looking forward for a better life. They have celebrated the arrival of the deal in anticipation of a better life for them in Tehran and other Iranian cities and areas. But if time continues and they are still living the same hardship they are going through today, I don't know what kind of an effect it will. We all know what kind of an effect it will have on their own stability in that country. But we do wish that they do think again and have a change in their policy.
Sheikh Khalid, thank you very much. Now, I've got an 8 or 9, so everybody will be crisp and straightforward. The first one in the second round, François Hesbourg, your microphone's on.
Thank you, John. Sheikh Khalid, in your very thought-provoking and incisive speech, you underscored both the need for unity in Syria, that is not working for one community alone, and you emphasized the need for some form of containment vis-à-vis Iran. Now, there is a new player in the region, at least new in terms of forceful intervention, and that is Russia. Russia, in terms of military intervention, appears to be operating in favor of one community rather than in favor of all. And on the other hand, Russia also appears to be cooperating very tightly with Iran in terms of the conduct of its policy and operations in Syria. So I'd be very interested if you, Sheikh Khaled, could share your thoughts with us about the role of Russia in Syria and possibly more broadly in the region. Just a very quick comment to Anthony Blinken. The Russian intervention in Syria is about the size of that of Britain and France in Libya in 2011. It's not that costly, and I would be very surprised if Russia could not sustain such an effort despite its other difficulties until, let's say, the end of the current electoral cycle in the United States of America in November of next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From Germany, Dr. Florence Gaub. Your microphone's on.
Yes. Good morning, Florence Gaub from the EU Institute for Security Studies. I'd like to actually jump on Francois Bour's question because looking at Russia's military tactics in Chechnya, one of the most, well, in brackets, successful counterinsurgency operation has turned Grozny not only into the most destroyed city on earth, but also one of the most dangerous. So what will you do, or what can we do, to stop Russia from turning Aleppo or Raqqa into the next Grozny?
Thank you very much. And from the IISS, Mark Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. Question to Sheikh Khalid. Minister, thank you for your gracious hosting and clear presentation this morning. Deputy Secretary Blinken referred to constructive discussions yesterday in Vienna. For the first time, all external states participated in the Syria peace talks. The Manama Dialogue has been another venue for constructive discussion, and not just among like-minded states. Past dialogues have included citizens of all states of the region. This year, unlike the peace talks in Vienna, there do not appear to be any participants carrying an Iranian passport. Some other invitees similarly encountered difficulty with travel documentation. My question is, has something extraordinary happened this year that prevented Iranian participation, and can we look forward to a resumption of a fully inclusive event next year?
From Jordan, Dr. Adnan Hayanjani.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Adnan Hayajna. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a very untypical question regarding, I think, the option if it is considered or thought about, because we have thought about so many solutions to solve the Daesh problem and other problems. Is there any scenario or anything that's happening on the ground of negotiating with Daesh, formal or informal channels of communication with them between the U.S. and maybe other Arab countries? My second point is how the United States view the unilateral action by the de facto leader of the Arab world, Saudi Arabia, and how they evaluate and view their role of taking unilateral actions in regional issues. Thank you.
Dr. Adnan, could you just clarify your point about channels of communication? Channels of communication between whom?
Between the United States, between some of the Arab countries and Daesh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. And your question is to both panelists or to just one of them?
Yes, please.
And from Pakistan, Brigadier Nadia Mir.
Secretary Blinken, the balance of power in the region is greatly disturbed. A new policy is needed to deal with both the terrorist forces and also umpire forces or those who would hegemonize, because there is, simply speaking, everybody fighting everyone. So how do you bring about balance of power, which is the real issue within the region, of course, along with the local support of the GCC?
From the U.S., James Jeffrey.
Mic on? Thank you very much. This is a question for Tony Blinken. Tony, in your response to Josh Rogan, you talked about one of the effects of arming and supporting and apparently now accompanying by the United States the forces fighting Daesh in Syria, that this will have some pressure also on Assad. Is this simply a unintended consequence? Is this something that the United States will favor, pursue, and intends to see happen? Thank you.
Thank you. And from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Staff Air Vice Marshal Abdullah.
Abdullah Sadoun? Okay. Thank you. I'm from Ashura Council and also from Arab Parliament. In this region, it looks like we are fighting fires. Every time there is a fire, we go try to fight or chase mosquitoes. Why can't we ask what is the source that makes all those things? I think all the problems started in 1948, the conflicts between Arabs and Israel. All the military coups, they say we want to liberate Palestine. All the terrorism, all the Islamic movements that is extreme, they say Palestine. Iran says death to Israel and United States. Why can't we try hard to solve this conflict that will solve all the rest of the conflicts in the Arab world? Especially the only country that can put pressure on Israel is United States, providing and that we try and we are serious. It is for the interest, it's for the benefit of Israel and Palestine. If they continue what they are doing now, we will never have peace in this region. Thank you.
Thank you. And from the UK, but originally from Iran, Nazanin Ansari.
Thank you. This is a question to Secretary Bilkin. In your quest to engage the leaders and the power brokers of the Islamic Republic, whether it's in the nuclear deal field or Syria, how confident are you and how can you ensure that you do not end up empowering those elements who do not share your vision of peace and stability and inclusive governance, whether it's within Iran or in the Middle East and the region? Thank you.
And from Korea, Hee-seok Kwon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We fully share the deep concern about the grave situation in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Palestine, as discussed eloquently and succinctly by the speakers. The peace talks on Syria has been held in Vienna for the past 2 days. We hope they would produce far-reaching results. In the post-nuclear deal period, Iran's next move is getting much attention from the international community, not only from the region. We would like to join others in encouraging Iran to play a constructive role in many security fields. Now, over the past years, it seems that the U.S. policy toward the Middle East has gone through readjustment, recalibration, or readaptation in the changed strategic environment, but not necessarily disengagement, as Secretary Blinken has said, or wholesale reformulation of its existing policy. As Secretary Blinken mentioned, the U.S. would remain in the region in the long run. We would expect the United States to continue to develop and strengthen the practical relations with regional powers and exercise the much-needed leadership. Meanwhile, President Obama has been making strong commitments to Asian rebalancing or pivot to Asia to maintain peace and stability in Asia and the Pacific. You may have been repeatedly asked about this question, perhaps in the context of Shangri-La dialogue, as mentioned by Mr. John Chinman. In fact, Asia today is not less uncertain or fluid than the Middle East, provided that the human and financial resources are always limited. I'm wondering how the United States would manage the commitments to both regions, or how to reconcile these two important commitments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll just take two more, and then we'll come back to the panel to close this first plenary. From Saudi Arabia, Walid Abdul Khalid.
Assalamu alaikum. To Sheikh Khalid, I think no matter how much military power there is to fight Daesh, I think it's a losing war because it's more about ideology rather than military. I think my question is, I'm just interested in your view, why Daesh are being very successful in attracting people from the region and all over the world? And then very quick again to Secretary Blinken, there hasn't been a speech of any senior U.S. government official without the famous statement, Israel has the right to defend itself. When will it be time to also state Palestinians have the right to defend themselves?
Thank you very much. And the last question from Bahrain, Rashid Saad Al-Dosari.
My question is to Mr. Blinken. To many observers in this area, mainly the U.S. allies, U.S. policies lately has become like a riddle to them. We don't know what the United States is trying to do with many issues that are outstanding in the area, mainly the pressing issues of Syria, Iraq, and the Iranian nuclear file and Iran itself in this area. Not to mention, of course, the Palestinians, which many has touched upon here. Can you put things into perspective? I mean, all what we heard is so far, even this new statement, Mr. Blinken, is general ideas and ideals. Can we have something specific about solution to these, what the United States, or maybe this is, as somebody has hinted, that maybe this is part of U.S. disengagement in this area and shifting to Southeast Asia or somewhere else? I mean, it's interesting there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll ask Sheikh Khalid to take the couple of questions that came to him, and then I'll turn to Tony Blinken. I think one or two of those questions can be grouped together since there were a few consistent themes. Sheikh Khalid first.
Thank you very much, John. Question by Mr. Heisberg about the Russian role in Syria. We hope that the role, it all started when we were in the United Nations, and there were a lot of activity then there to try to understand what exactly the targets were of the first bombing. But we do hope that the Russian intervention, we all understand that Russia has interest in Syria, and this is something that we've been living with for decades. And we accept that they've been there for a while and they have a very deep relationship. But we do want, when Syria comes to a crisis like what's going through now, we do want to see that role to be helping Syria, the whole of Syria, coming together in fighting terror and rescuing their nation. And it's not about getting with one side or the other. So let's hope that this involvement will lead into working with the world allies in getting an understanding between the Syrians themselves in order to save this very important country of the Middle East. Regarding their relationship with Iran, I don't see a strategic relationship between the two countries. I see an ad hoc convergence of interests coming into this issue of that country. So let's hope that at the end of the day, it's the Syrian people's well-being that should be preserved, and let's hope that this interference will only lead to a better life for the Syrians. So far, we're still working toward that direction. The question by Mr. Fitzpatrick about Iranian participation. I constantly invited my colleague, Mr. Zarif, and even before him, Mr. Salehi. The last participant here was Minister Minuchar Muttaki in the Manama Dialogue in 2010, and I haven't heard any response. I will continue to do so, and if there are some people who were not able to come and join us in this dialogue, we will definitely have reasons regarding their entrance into our country, especially in the volatile situation with all the proxies that we are fighting in this region, especially that has to do with Yemen or other countries. So we are very careful not to have links with any of people of this sort, but we will continue to invite Iran, to invite official Iran in this matter, and we will continue to engage with the Iranian people in every different way. A question from if I get it right, from our friend from Jordan, whether we do have any communications or links with Daesh. No, not at all. Daesh is an enemy. We are fighting Daesh. We are apprehending Daesh members whenever we see them or find them at home. We're sending them to court for such crimes, and we will never initiate any communications with them. Then the last question that came to me was from our friend from Saudi Arabia, Walid Abdu Khalid. Why Daesh is so successful, or how is it to be defeated? It's not only, I agree with you, it's not only military action that will defeat a terrorist group, especially one like Daesh, with all its messaging that is using our religion, with all its use of grievances here and there, with all its finances that it's gathering from stealing artifacts and destroying culture and selling it in world markets, from stealing oil and also marketing it everywhere here and there. So I think the effort is evolving. It's not only military. There's other sides that we're doing a lot of great efforts with our allies. We're doing a very good effort in countering terrorist financing, and we're coming a long way in that and trying to limit the sources of income that they will do. And this is a very important one. And also, we have to continue to counter violent extremism and continue to counter their violent messaging by counter-messaging and by sending the right messages to the wider public that their message is distorted and wrong. So the point is, to sum it, if we will only concentrate in fighting those soldiers that are in Raqqa or occupying Mosul or everywhere, we're fighting with the foot soldiers. You'll have to really have it with a strategy to really defeat the fascists, the theo-fascists here in this case. And they are the people who are bringing those people and throwing them into this fire. And this will take some time, and these people are everywhere, they're all over the region, and it will be an effort that we will have to counter them and fight them until they are fully defeated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me try perhaps to group a couple of these questions together, since there were some common themes, John, as you suggested. For Francois and Dr. Gaub regarding Russia, I guess I'd say a couple of things. First, Francois, I think you're right that as a pure economic proposition, particularly in a state where the president can make his own decisions about dedicating resources, Russia conceivably could keep going for some period of time. But the point I was making is that with every passing day, various costs, not just economic, but also political and security costs will rise. And the economic costs will begin to become real, particularly if coupled with the costs of sustaining a significant presence either in Ukraine or on its borders. But the broader question is this, and it also goes to Dr. Gaub. I think what Russia has demonstrated in both Ukraine and now in Syria is that President Putin is able to act very decisively in a tactical fashion. But I believe that in both places he is making profound strategic mistakes. In Ukraine, as a result of Russia's intervention, that country is now more united than it's ever been, looking toward the West and away from Russia. And that's a direct result of Russia's intervention. Before its intervention in Ukraine, about 30% of the people there wanted to join NATO. Now it's between 65 and 70%. NATO itself is more energized than it's been in recent years as a result of that intervention. Europe is now more focused on energy security than it's been in recent years as a result of that intervention. And Russia's economy is in a very delicate state, in large part because of sanctions, but also because of the falling price of oil. So as a strategic proposition, Russia's intervention was a mistake. Similarly, in Syria, we can see the same design taking shape. And in particular, as I try to suggest, the costs of being perceived as being in alliance with Assad, Hezbollah, and Iran are going to exert profound costs on Russia when it comes to its relations with many countries in this part of the world, not to mention its own Sunni population. And I think that there's also a recognition that, as I suggested, this fight cannot be won militarily on the ground in Syria, and despite the tremendous onslaught of Russian air power, there have been very few gains on the ground. So my hope is that Russia will look at that in a very rational fashion and draw certain conclusions. And those conclusions would be to work closely with us and other countries to achieve a political transition. And as I suggested also, I believe there are very significant common interests in Syria when it comes to Russia and many of the countries in our coalition. Next, with regard to communications with Daesh, yes, we are communicating with Daesh with 7,700 airstrikes. And no, we're not talking to them. There's no project by which it would be possible to do that and to achieve any coherent result. They've made clear what they're interested in communicating, and we've made even more clear what we will continue to communicate. With regard to the balance of power being disturbed, I think that's exactly right, and that's what I was trying to get at when I talked about all of these different forces that have now brought themselves to bear, not just in the Middle East, but around the world, with power shifting among states, within them, below them, beyond them, in ways that we have not seen before. But as I also tried to suggest, nowhere is that more evident than in the Middle East, and it's further complicated by long-standing differences and divisions that only make it more difficult to resolve. So I think in the first instance, our obligation and commitment is to help our friends and partners defend themselves against any external aggression. And as I said, that is a vital national interest of the United States. But at the same time, it's in doing so to help empower them to deal with these challenges, and also to help them empower their own societies at home to build inclusive, effective, tolerant governance, because it is our conviction that that is the single best answer and guarantor not only of progress, but of stability. With regard to, see if I can group some of these questions. With regard to whether we can, in effect, walk and chew gum at the same time, that is, deal with challenges here in the Middle East with our partners, but also rebalance toward Asia, not to mention work that we're doing in many other parts of the world, whether it's Africa or in the Western Hemisphere. I believe the answer is yes, we can. But it's precisely because these interests are so widespread and diverse and vital that to succeed, we have to do it, as I said, by helping also to empower others, empowering others to meet their own responsibilities, to take on their own challenges with our strong and hopefully decisive support. And that's very much what we're trying to do here. In Asia, the rebalance itself is multifaceted. It's not simply a question of a military reorientation, as we've seen just recently with the conclusion of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. It's also profoundly economic. And that agreement, now concluded, and if supported by our Congress and the other countries, will tie us in profound and multiple ways to Asia far into the future. And we see it as well with our expansion of people-to-people ties, which is something that we also want to continue to expand here in the Middle East. And let me see what I've missed. Let's see. So on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I, again, could not agree more with the Vice Marshal that we have a strong and vital incentive to do what we can to help resolve it. And I believe that that has been a hallmark not just of this administration, but of virtually all of our predecessors, Republican and Democrat alike. But let me suggest two other things. First, I'll repeat what I said before. Whatever we do, however much effort we put into it, we can't want that outcome more than the parties themselves. They have to be determined to achieve it, and we'll be continuing to test that proposition. Second, I recognize that resolving the conflict, first and foremost, would be vital to the people of Israel and the people of Palestine, and indeed the best way to guarantee the security of both. But I have to disagree that this conflict, as dangerous and difficult and enduring as it is the source of every other conflict in this region. It's not clear to me exactly how it is that the perpetuation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is what's fueling events in Syria and the civil war there. It's not clear to me how that conflict is fueling what's happening in Yemen and the fight there. It's not clear to me how it is fueling what Daesh is doing in Iraq, Syria, and beyond. So our commitment, our determination to work to resolve the conflict is real, but let's not ascribe every problem in this region to its perpetuation. And let's see. Try to see what else I missed. I guess there's the broad question, and I tried to address it, I think, Dr. Ansari, about how confident are we about not empowering those who don't share our views and our values. I'd be the first to admit it's something that we struggle with on a regular basis. And it's why we're working so closely with so many partners, not only to help them build up their capacity to deal with threats, but also to suggest with humility, as well as from a great distance, that it's our conviction that the best guarantor of not only progress, but also stability in a sustained way is building open, tolerant, inclusive political systems. And as everyone knows, that's an ongoing conversation.
Tony, thank you very much, Sheikh Khalid, too. From both speakers this morning, we've heard strong political statements and the setting out of national policy, but I think we've also heard very crisp and cogent analysis and assessment that helps all of us understand the premises on which policies have been built. This first plenary has laid out the political context and also, I think, established the analytical tone for this Manama dialogue. We reconvene in 29 minutes for the second plenary, but could you please take 30 seconds now to thank our two speakers?